do not plan to keep us too long today because I had a busy day myself, and if we can go for maybe half an hour, we can always continue next time. Last week we did a lot of brainstorming and talking about the structure of a future HTM course, and also looking at the typical topics that would add value to a course like that. And there were lots of suggestions. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to make or post or email any extra notes from the discussions of last week, but I did manage to download and post the recording in the WhatsApp group. So I hope everything is there captured in that recording. Although it would be nice to have a scribe so that those discussions can be summarized and emailed, because it's always nice when you have something to have a look at, something on paper or something on the screen to look at, rather than sit down and listen to the recordings. Be that as it may, we will proceed all the same. And so what I wanted to suggest for us to do today, because last week we had quite a list of different topics. So I'm thinking if today we can try to group some of those topics we listed last week into 3 categories, because we mentioned last week that we can't have all of them in one course. We have to divide them into 3 different courses, like HTM1, HTM2, HTM3, or Clinical Technology Management 1, 2, and 3, or we can say introductory level, intermediate, and advanced level. So today, if it's okay, what I would like us to do is to try to find a way to group some of those topics into 3 categories so that we can have HTM1 as one category, HTM2 as a second category, which would be like the intermediate level, and then the advanced level, which will be HTM3. So those 3 categories. And then when we meet again next time, we can now go a little bit into more content. Like if we take HTM1, for instance, and we look at those topics in HTM1, we can now break them down into subtopics. We take a topic, for instance, we say, okay, what and what should this topic contain? If we're going to present or teach this topic, what would be like the contents of that topic? So that way we are kind of creating or developing the curriculum. And then once we know what the contents of each topic will be, then we can talk about the teaching and learning activities. And we can then talk about the teaching and learning activities under each of those topics, so that if we're presenting a topic, will it be lectures? Will it be discussion? Will it be activity? Will it be case study? What would it be? So what would the teaching and learning activity be under each of those topics? So once we start developing that, then we'll then have a sense of how long each will take. And once we do that for each of them, then we can have a sense of the total duration of the whole course, which will then give us the number of hours for the course. But that's just my suggestion, and I welcome any suggestion along those lines that will help us to make progress. What do you think, colleagues?
Well, my initial thought, if I may, Tim, is you did say that what you saw as almost a natural progression, that those who have completed the MEM course, have asked for and would be, if you like, the target group, or initial target group for an HTM course. So the one approach would be to say, well, if we look at the content of the MEM course, what are the kind of next steps or the next layer that supports and informs medical equipment maintenance? Because that then would be like the obvious progression. And we could bring in the elements then that more kind of focuses and supports maintenance, and then move beyond those to the other areas. But that's just what my one thought for everybody's kind of consideration.
Yeah, I think I perfectly agree. There should be a natural progression, such that those who have done the MEM, once they are introduced to HTM, it will be like one step ahead of what they've done already. So there's a seamless progression from the one course to another one, and then eventually to the next, and then to the next. I perfectly agree with that line of thoughts. Colleagues, are you there?
Yes,
Mary,
yes,
yes. Good afternoon.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think without risking of repeating ourselves, I am in agreement that we can group all the different modules or subject into 3 main module, and then see into which one, and then align them also in terms of progression, see which one comes first and which other module will depend on the understanding of the first one. So some of them follow each other. But I'm in agreement that 3 is good enough, and it's all about now brainstorming on which one, how will we name those 3. I think by now we talk about medical or management technology 1 and 2 and 3. Now, which are the subjects that will fall into it? I think that should be what we will be discussing next. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so
Tim, if I may, just a variation on that could be that we don't necessarily need to partition them into like separate topics for each HTM course. We could start off, with a fairly broad range of topics for HTM1, but that would be at a fundamental level, which is actually kind of what you already suggested. So we don't have to create these silos. Well, we can create, if you like, a vertical separation, but also a progression, so layers, so horizontal and vertical. That becomes a large matrix. So once they've completed MEM plus all 3 HTM courses, then the whole matrix is populated. But what I'm saying is we can address a number of the columns if the columns are the various topics and areas in HTM course, but it would be at a kind of a low level, so the initial layers, and then we move on from there.
Okay. So when you talk about columns and layers, can you perhaps elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, sorry, I'm not being very, very clear. So the columns would be the various topics. So for example, planning, needs assessment, budgeting, risk management. I'm trying to remember regulations that we spoke about, standards. So those would be the columns, or I call them the columns in a matrix. And then the rows or the layers would be the complexity associated with those topics. So the bottom layer of regulation would be perhaps focus on 1 or 2 key standards that impact on medical equipment maintenance, as an example. but not kind of going to any great depth. And then as we go into the second and the third course, we introduce more and more, of the standards and complexity.
Okay. Yeah, and also to help us with that, perhaps I should share screen of the brochure for the medical equipment maintenance course so that we see the topics that are covered there already. Just to refresh our minds to say, okay, this is what we have for the MEM. So what would be the natural progression from here? So we have these topics, ethics, safety and hazard management, preventive maintenance management, corrective maintenance, inventory and quality management, communication, ECG, blood pressure, pulse oximetry, etc., etc. Then we have the practical side, where we did practicals for ECG, blood pressure monitoring, pulse oximetry, all done under patient monitoring. Then defibrillators, ventilators, infusion, then electrosurgery, neonatal incubators, and all that. And also the use of the testing equipment. So if one does this course, what then would be which of the topics that we mentioned last week and that we are mentioning today would be a natural progression from here onwards? I know, for instance, that when we talk about preventive maintenance in the MEM, it's just the basics. And I know that that can be taken further in the next course, for instance, where you go into a bit more detail on the preventive maintenance, where you even talk about the scoring system and so on and so forth. But those are just ideas, and yeah, we can brainstorm on them. But let's talk about a natural progression from here. Given what we have in the MEM, what topics or subjects, based on what we've mentioned already last week and now, would provide a seamless shift to the next level? You know what I mean?
If I may step in here, for me, after going through medical equipment and related test equipment, the next logic from my understanding will be the life cycle.
Okay.
At the hospital level, we will be looking at from the interest we have for a certain equipment all the way to disposing of that equipment. That will be the next thing. That will then involve going through roadshow or having a demo, having it done in the hospital. If we happy purchasing the equipment, get the end user to be trained, schedule the equipment for service, make financial provision for service and possible corrective maintenance, and then see into for equipment that requires certain regulation. We see if we cover the size of licenses. And yeah, then after that, safety disposal, same apply to equipment that are governed by by SAPRA, if there is a specific way of disposing of a radioactive equipment. And all of that together for me, as a healthcare technology manager, will be the next step. After understanding the equipment and the test equipment, the next thing will be understand how to manage equipment from day one to the last day.
So if we're to give that a tacit title, perhaps it would be something like medical equipment lifecycle management. Is that correct?
Something like that, yeah. Given that it include a financial related cost.
Okay. So this goes from procurement all the way to safe disposal
Yes, sir.
of the equipment.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I like that because that would be, if you like, the next layer following on from medical equipment maintenance. I was thinking about needs assessment and planning and budgeting, but perhaps that can come into HTM2 because that would be the next layer following that. So I like what has just been suggested because it does include some of the areas that we mentioned last week, like financial management. It includes regulations and standards. Another link that would be, or possible kind of topic for HTM1 would be asset management as a generic topic, because it also links to a number, even preventive and maintenance and corrective maintenance are part of asset management. It also brings in the life cycle aspect in terms of managing the life cycle of an asset, as opposed to just saying, well, of a specific piece of equipment. And that brings in the engineering asset management standard 55,000 series. Yeah, so that's my thought. And then in terms of communication also, I don't know what was covered in this course, but in terms of maybe some templates for, reporting, maybe even like some form of initial audit. Again, falls under links to asset management, but I think to do an audit, a basic audit of, say, the percentage of equipment that any one time on average is waiting for repair, or that is fully functional, or whatever the case might be, that would link to performance as well.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. So you spoke about asset management, you spoke about engineering, asset management standard 55000 series. And yeah, so I like that. And you also talked about communication. So this would be now a level above what was discussed already in MEM, which is just basic communication. So here, the communication here, I like the mention of inclusion of reporting templates, right?
Yeah.
And also basic audits, like medical equipment audits. Is that correct?
Yeah, a basic one, but to basically be able to do a fairly rapid audit, but then get some valuable data and intelligence on the asset fleet, which then points to the need for maintenance. And then while I'm speaking, another important point that Terry made, which I think would also be a natural progression, would also be service provider management.
Yes, yes. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think that's an important one. And this is part of the challenges that Nashima Tabeya usually have in Namibia. And she phones me all the time. How do I manage these people? How do I address, these are challenges I'm facing. How do I? And we speak often about these things. So I think it's a very important one, understanding how to manage outside service providers. Well, there's in-house service available, but when that's not sufficient, of course, definitely one needs to manage outside service providers. So that's important also to understand basically how the service providers and everything that has to do with it is managed. Okay. Great. So I think that is an important one, but still coming back to communication. Is there anything more we can add under communication?
I mean, the one thing that I would add is again stakeholder recognition. So, who are the stakeholders one would need to communicate with to optimize the maintenance function.
Okay. Okay.
And what would their, if you like, perspective be? So, you know, understanding the needs of those stakeholders would be important, if you like, background intelligence or information when communicating.
Okay.
And also establishing linkages with colleagues elsewhere and with international networks. I mean, we can expose them to, you know, the GCA, the IFMB, CED kind of webinars and all that. And that,
yes,
in a sense, is kind of, it goes beyond communication. It goes on to kind of professional practice. So again, that would be an introduction to professional practice, and also communicating with colleagues in, you know, in other countries and in other regions.
Yes. Yeah, we are not an island. We have colleagues in other parts of the world who are doing great work, who are presenting what they do by way of webinars, seminars, conferences, and getting to know about these colleagues, collaborating with them, interacting with them, learning from them, sharing ideas. I think it's a great way to go. I remember recently one of the guys from Mindray, the Chinese guy, we had a discussion. He was in my office, I think last month, and he did talk about the need. Actually, he's trying to find a way for KISA, particularly KISA Gauteng, for us to link up with their colleagues, because they have what he calls a clinical, some sort of clinical engineering association in China. And they also link up with clinical engineers in other parts of the world. And they do have a forum where they talk about issues of common interests in both countries. Like, they do have webinars, they have discussion forum, they have panel discussions, etc., where they talk about complex topical issues that affect both countries. So you have a panelist talk about it from the perspective of their country. There may be a panelist from this side talking about the same issue from the perspective of this country and how they deal with it. So that way they learn from each other. So I think that kind of international interaction and collaboration, it's a good thing. And introducing participants to that kind of platform, I think, will add a lot of value in terms of enhancing communication, both within amongst ourselves and also with colleagues in other countries internationally. Yeah, so I'm taking note of that. Yes, go ahead.
Tell me, if I'm not mistaken, actually Mindray had a big event last week or the week before, because I know that Elliot Sloan from GCA in the States, he was invited to go and be a keynote speaker at the Mindray event, as I said, literally in last week or 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, they actually wanted to get KISA involved somehow. But, you know, I also mentioned some of this with KISA, but they are a bit too slow to catch on because, you know, with KISA, Mindray is a gold partner, whatever, gold corporate partner. And they do have limited slots per year where they present webinars. And the feeling in KISA is that they do not necessarily want one partner to dominate, to have more slots than others. They want it to be even. So with these suggestions coming from Mindray about this, you know, collaborations, webinars, the thinking is, from what I gather from my discussion with them, we don't want Mindray to take advantage and have more slots than others. So they didn't quite understand it the way it's supposed to be understood. But I know that Mindray is trying to be proactive because they have all these programs and projects and webinars and collaborations. They are being proactive. And secondly, it's just a suggestion for KISA, particularly KISA and Gauteng, to participate in such events if they want to. There's no compulsion. But I also think it's a good thing if KISA can take advantage of such opportunities to have more organizations outside of South Africa, apart from the ones they already collaborate with, to network with, to broaden the networking tentacles overseas. So, but the discussions are still ongoing. I know that part of the delay was that the AGM is coming for KISA, and they wanted to have the AGM first and have the new leadership, and then perhaps the new leadership can take on these new initiatives if they want to. But I'm aware of some of these programs from Mindray, and they have quite a number of them and lined up for the year. And they are even inviting us as TUT students to bring our students to Mindray. They have a fantastic showroom. Last year we were there, they invited us, and they're inviting our students again this year, and are actually providing transport for the students to go to their showroom so they can have exposure of what it looks like, you know, to be in industry. So these are great initiatives which we're still looking into, and I think KISA should take advantage of them. Okay. Yeah, so stakeholder recognition, establishing linkages and international connections, professional practice. Okay, so I have that noted. Great.
Hi, Mr. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Can you hear me properly?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry, I'm driving, so, but I'm not sure if I might be a bit off topic, but when you're doing health technology, when you're a health technology manager, right?
Yes.
You also have people to manage. So I think a lot of people get into management or the management of HTM, but then they lack people's management skills, right?
Okay.
So maybe we can have a section where it talks about basic people management or HR management, something like that, just basic, and also how to, like, when you what do you call this now, resources, like how
Yes.
to identify how many resources you need, because you will need your technicians, you probably need your assistants and stuff like that. Maybe we do there's that thing where we look at how many beds we have in the facility and how many technicians we'll need for those beds, stuff like that. So
Okay.
I was just thinking we need to add that portion, because managing your people as a manager it's very important.
Okay. So can we call that human resources management, where you're managing your human resources?
We could, although the way I see it, and I think it's a very important topic, so thanks for raising it. I think the one would be staffing for maintenance, because, you know,
Okay.
what you're saying, you look at, you know, the size of facility or the facilities that you serve, and then there needs to be a way of determining how many human resources, so technicians, assistants, whatever one would require.
Yeah.
And then the managing the staff would actually be the next, also one of the step up from communication. So communicating with staff and managing staff. So
Okay.
I'd make that distinction that there are two very important kind of you know, topics that have been suggested there, and we shouldn't combine them into one. The staffing levels for maintenance is certainly one topic. And then communication and management of human resources would be another one. And then while I've got the floor, just my last point,
Yeah.
getting back to the previous point, you know, in globally, they often talk about BMETs, so the biomedical equipment technicians. So I think it would be also important as kind of stakeholders or global stakeholders, to introduce them to the concept of BMETs, and then maybe give them access to some of the resources that BMETs have access to, and maybe even put them in contact with some of those colleagues or associations.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, it's quite a lot. Because I'm also thinking of, like, when we talk about developing a clinical engineering department or workshop, right? That also includes the management of basic resources like the staffing of the workshop, how many technicians, how many engineers, how many artisans, how many technologists, and that will be based on the number of beds in the hospital, the size of the hospital. And then you're managing, of course, you have your workshop. In the workshop, you need tools, you need equipment, and other kind of resources. So you have the tools, you have the equipment, you have the furniture, you have the human resources in terms of the technicians, the clerks, the whatever. So I'm trying to see how we can marry all of that together into the suggestions we just made now about human resource management, staffing for maintenance, managing the staff, etc., and the one you just talked about, BMETs. And do we, for the sake of this discussion, say BMET/CET, or do we separate it? Biomedical engineering technicians, technologists, / clinical engineering technicians, technologists, do we make a distinction, or can we, for the sake of this exercise, combine them together using a /?
Yeah, I would combine them to just keep it simple.
Okay.
And in terms of the question that you posed to us, I assume, I think if you could create maybe a Google doc on Google that we could access, and I could also help you with that if you like. And then
yes, please, I'll appreciate that, because I've run out of space on my. I just got a notice yesterday that my Google Drive is is full.
I'd be happy to do that, and then colleagues can also asynchronously provide input and comments.
Okay.
So that we can actually, before the next meeting, we can hopefully get all the other people and ourselves included to revisit and improve the list or categories.
Yeah. Okay. I think that would be great. Thank you. So we're making good progress. I think in the next 10 more minutes, I think we should wrap up. I wouldn't want us to stay beyond 5 o'clock because we are all tired. But are there any more suggestions? So far, I have medical equipment, life cycle management, which includes needs assessment, financial management, regulation standards. Then we have asset management. Then we have communication. There's a lot we mentioned under communication. Then service provider management. And then we also talked about human resource management and staffing for maintenance or managing of staff. And underneath that, we also mentioned the BMET/CET, etc. Okay, that's good progress.
Maybe something that comes to my mind now, but we mentioned it in the previous meeting, is the ethic of clinical engineering or biomedical engineering. I mean, in an environment of healthcare, we might be tempted to take shortcuts especially when facing audit. For instance, get some I'm talking out of experience, not necessarily, I haven't done that, but some supplier could come and service something today, but they backdate it to a few months ago because they need to comply. We need to stay away from that because after all, many of this equipment, many patient life depend on this equipment. So ethics should be there. And then something that we also do not mention often, but that's also part of ethics, is how do we handle suppliers financially? I know also there is, again, out of experience, there is this, again, no, not many speak about it, but the tendency of preferring certain supplier and then have certain benefits is really very difficult to place it, but such thing exists in the environment, and I feel like we need to try and discourage as much as we can future clinical engineer of such practice.
So that's having preference for certain suppliers because of the benefit one gets from them, perhaps.
Such things, yes. And then all of that will fall under ethics of clinical engineering. Something that just crossed my mind.
Okay. Ethics. Yeah, that's would also be a natural progression from the ethics we did in the MEM. Because in the MEM course, we introduced ethics, get to understand what it is, and then we introduced, because we work with people, other members of the healthcare team like nurses and doctors, we try to review what is the code of ethics for the nurses and for the doctors, and then for the clinical engineering profession, clinical engineering stroke biomedical engineering profession. And then we did a case study, and then there's an assignment that followed that. So this could be a natural progression from that also, where we go a bit deeper. And you also talked about, under this topic, audits of medical equipment.
Yes.
Okay. And ethical consideration when handling outside service providers. Okay. I'm sure we can populate that further, possibly in the next meeting, but we get the general idea. Thank you.
Tim, just one last point. In terms of the colleagues in the call and your experience of the people who've done that MEM course, are they versed in Excel, for example? So just thinking in terms of, Excel as a powerful tool, if you like, that would support some of this work, the financial, the asset management, inventory, number one. And then also in terms of communication, we also have verbal communication. So, being able to, it goes back to the templates, to being able to communicate effectively with your suppliers, with your superiors in a formal way. And that would be Word and possibly even PowerPoint presenting, to stakeholders. So Word, PowerPoint, Excel as tools that would support basic skills that are required to enhance, the maintainer's performance, personal performance, and also team performance.
Yeah, I think that's an important one, which was not covered in that way in the MEM. Okay, so under communication, now you're mentioning tools for effective communication, right?
Correct.
And such tools as will be used for verbal communication, for presentation like PowerPoint, and then tools like Excel, using spreadsheets, etc., etc.
Yeah, and reporting. So reporting as well.
Tools for reporting. Okay. And other types of templates that could aid the communication process, reporting and communicating whatever needs to be passed across. Okay. Okay, fine. So all of that can come under communication, right?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Okay, things are shaping up. I think we have almost about 8 broad topics at the moment. And I don't think we should have more than 10 for this initial stage. Anything else that anyone has thought about or something you feel needs to be included here? Okay, no, I think we have 7 because this is just an expansion then of communication. Okay.
Hello, sir. It's Katu again.
Yes, Katri.
I just wanted to find out, sorry. Will we have a section where it's like, we have like an introduction to HTM, where we explain like what HTM is, like, I don't know, like the basics of HTM before we go into depth of like your life cycles and stuff like that. Like basically just explain for someone who doesn't know, explaining or trying to understand what HTM is and what it includes. So
Okay,
it's basically just introduction.
I think that's a good one. Yeah, I think we can add that as well. Yes, I'll write it down. Introduction to HTM. Okay. Because people need to know what it is and what it is not, and what it entails, how broad it is, and what it covers. Okay. Great. Okay, colleagues, I do not wish to keep us any further. It's been a productive meeting and it's recorded, so I'll make the recording available in the WhatsApp group for colleagues who were not able to attend today, and I'll post the link on the chat in WhatsApp. And also, Mr. Poluta has offered to create that Google Drive, which we very much appreciate. And we can go there and make our contributions and add whatever ideas we have, so we can actually see how things are shaping up based on what will be posted on the Google Drive, and then we'll take it from there. So hopefully we'll meet again same time next week. But if there's any extenuating circumstance that may warrant a change of date or time, let's communicate in the WhatsApp group. Otherwise, we can meet again for about the same time next week, Wednesday. Well, thank you very much, colleagues. I don't know if there's anything anyone else wants to say before we close for now.
No, just thank you, Tim. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and see you again next week.
See you
Bye.
next week.
Thank you, sir. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Mr. Okai?
Yes, Merine.
Yeah, I've sent you those